You people never learn, do you? That's the first thing the officer said. No good morning, no explanation. Just those 5 words barked out like a warning, loud enough for pedestrians to stop mid-step. The sun had barely cleared the skyline. Traffic buzzed like usual, commuters, coffee cups, and morning radio chatter floating in the air. Then, with a sudden, splitting wail, a siren shattered the calm. A sleek black car had just eased off the ramp onto Broad Street, to seconds later flashing lights. A police cruiser cut in front, another block behind. The city hadn't even woken up properly, but this was already escalating. Step out of the car, now. The officer's voice was sharp, the kind laced with predetermined authority. His hand hovered near his weapon. His partner watched the other lane, already calling for backup. Inside the black car, the driver calmly rolled the window down. He wore a dark charcoal suit, nothing flashy. His cuffs were clean. His eyes, focused. Focused in the way you only get after years of training to stay calm while the world goes loud. I just merged. What's the charge? He asked. You were clocked at 92 and a 45. The officer snapped. License, registration, and step out. But I just pulled out from a parking deck 2 blocks ago. I said step out, and there it was. That voice, not of justice, of judgment. Have you ever felt that moment when you know you're not being heard, only watched, scanned, judged? Let me ask you this. If you were black, in a suit, in a luxury car, how fast do you think someone decides what box you fit into? He stepped out, hands visible, still calm, still silent. And what he did next made every phone on the sidewalk start recording. But the moment that shut the street down, it hadn't happened yet. You're going to want to hear what came out of his jacket pocket because that changed everything. The officer circled around the car, sunglasses hiding eyes that burned with assumption. He tapped the trunk with his flashlight. Pop it. The man didn't argue, just reached inside and unlocked the trunk from the dashboard. It opened slow. Inside, a leather duffel, neatly folded coat, and a laptop case with a security tag. The officer didn't touch anything. He just nodded to his partner, who stepped closer, hand still grazing his belt. You always keep your laptop in the trunk? The officer asked. It's standard protocol when transporting classified gear. The man replied, voice level. That made the officer pause for half a second, then his jaw set again. You military? He asked, with a hint of mockery. No, sir. Government? A slight smile. You could say that. The partner raised an eyebrow. You talk real smooth for someone breaking the law. Breaking the law. For merging onto a street with no radar trap. For wearing a suit. For driving a car that cost more than someone thought he could afford. Have you ever felt that, like your whole existence was a challenge to someone's worldview? Just then someone from the sidewalk spoke up. Hey, are you serious? He didn't even speed. It was a young woman holding a phone. She'd been filming the whole thing. The officer turned sharply. Step back, ma'am. He literally just turned the corner. She replied, not backing away. Then a man mid-30s, suit and tie added, you better be careful. This feels like profiling. You filming me? The officer barked. Phones were already out. You could hear the soft hum of recording. He turned back to the man in the suit. Give me your ID, now. The man nodded, slowly, then reached inside his blazer. This was the moment the entire block held its breath. People leaned forward. The officer's hand twitched toward his holster. But what came out wasn't a wallet. It was a slim black case, leather-bound, no logos. He opened it with one hand practiced, precise, and turned it toward the officer. The badge inside caught the sun. It wasn't local law enforcement. It wasn't private security. It was something else entirely. Gold seal, blue background, letters that made the officer blink. FBI Federal Bureau of Investigation. And below it, etched in sharp silver. Special Agent Ret. Clearance, Counter Intel Division. ID 3748 DC 99. The street went silent. Even the jogger across the street stopped mid-stride. The officer stared, his lips parted, but no words came out. His partner leaned closer, squinting at the badge. What division were you with?" the officer asked, finally, voice suddenly lower. "Cybercrime." Before that, internal investigations. Another beat. Then came the line that cracked the silence like thunder. "Do you want me to call your supervisor, or would you prefer internal affairs?" That's when the partner took a step back, and the crowd, oh, they felt it. You could almost hear it, that shift in power. Like gravity had flipped. Phones didn't just record anymore. They zoomed in. The woman who'd been filming whispered, "Holy SHT, he's FBI." The officer swallowed hard. But even then, he tried to hold face. "Why didn't you just say that?" he muttered. The CEO didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just replied, "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go." Have you ever wished you could freeze time just to watch someone realize they were completely wrong about you? That moment was exactly that. But the fallout, that hadn't even begun. Because what happened after one phone call, 5 minutes later, didn't just silence the officer. It made him reach for the radio in panic. You want to know what he heard on the other end? Stick around. Because the call that came next didn't come from the man he stopped. It came from Washington. The officer's hand hovered near his radio, but he didn't press the button. Not yet. His eyes flicked between the badge, the man's face, and the crowd now fully locked in. Someone across the street called out, "Call your chief. Bro, you just profiled a Fed." Laughter rippled through the sidewalk, but it wasn't joyful. It was sharp, dangerous. The kind that comes when justice tastes close enough to touch. The man in the suit, still nameless to the crowd, didn't flinch. He just stood there, badge open in one hand, the other hand holding nothing. No anger, no insult, just gravity. "I don't want this to escalate," he said quietly. "But if you continue detaining me without cause, that becomes a federal issue." "Sir, we didn't know," the partner began. "But you assume," the man interrupted, calmly. "You always do. Have you ever been in a room where someone finally stops pretending?" That's what this felt like. Like a man who'd played by the rules his entire life finally decided to speak the truth. And that truth, it made uniforms shake. Because right then the radio on the officer's chest crackled. "Unit 421, report status." He froze. Thumbed the mic. A 10 to 38, broad and Delancey. "Vehicle stop, no issues." Pause. Then a new voice cut in. A different tone. "This is Chief Daniels. Do not move. Stay where you are." Both officers stiffened. One looked at the other. The man closed his badge case and slipped it back inside his jacket. He wasn't smiling, but something in his eyes said, "Now you understand." A black SUV turned the corner a minute later. Unmarked, tinted. 2 men in suits stepped out, no lights, no urgency. But they moved like people used to having doors open for them, used to silence when they speak. One leaned in, whispered something into the officer's ear. The officer nodded, slow, eyes wide. Then the SUV man turned to the suited black man. "Agent Cole, we received the alert." That was the first time the crowd heard his name. Agent Cole. No one said a word. The man nodded once. "They pulled me. Claimed speeding. No radar. No probable cause. Opened my trunk without consent." "And your badge was visible?" "After they escalated. Yes." The SUV agent turned back to the officers. "Remove yourselves from this location immediately. You'll be contacted." The main officer who'd started the whole thing opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. You could see it, the gears in his head, trying to spin a story fast enough to save face. But the crowd, they weren't having it. They were filming. They were whispering. They were uploading. Because something had shifted. And everyone felt it. Have you ever witnessed a man fall without anyone touching him? That's what this looked like. Cole stepped back toward his car. The trunk closed softly behind him. He didn't slam it. He didn't gloat. He didn't speak again. But before getting in, he looked up, eyes scanning the block. And for a brief moment, they met the camera. Not angry, just tired. Like a man who'd had this conversation one too many times in his life, and still wasn't done having it. But that was just the street-level reaction. The real ripple effect didn't happen until hours later when the body cam footage leaked. and the mayor's office received 3 calls before noon. You won't believe who made the third one, and why that single phone call almost shut down the precinct overnight. Before I tell you what the third phone call was, let me pause for a second. I know you might be watching this while on a break. Maybe you're sipping your coffee, scrolling between meetings, or maybe just maybe you're already overwhelmed from what's unfolded so far. But if stories like this pull at something deep inside you, hit subscribe, because the twist that's coming next, it shook an entire department. Now back to the call. It wasn't from Cole. It wasn't from internal affairs either. The first call went to the mayor's office, routine damage control. The second, from the city's legal counsel, trying to predict what lawsuits were now hanging in the air like thunderclouds. But the third, that one came from Quantico. Direct, unscheduled, a name with clearance so high, his ID doesn't appear on public directories. Director Martin, code 7P, we need to talk about Philadelphia PD. The mayor's assistant almost dropped her phone. Within minutes, internal memos froze disciplinary protocols. All body cams from the unit were requested, not by the department, but by federal subpoena. By lunchtime, the precinct commander received an invitation, one he couldn't decline, to appear at the Eastern Federal Review Board in D.C. And as for the officer who'd barked at Cole, suspended. No badge, no gun. Pending federal investigation into civil rights violations and abuse of authority. You know what the most ironic part was? Cole never pressed charges. He never filed a complaint. He didn't need to. Because when someone like him, someone who used to investigate dirty officers, stays silent, the system itself starts to panic. And yet that afternoon, while the media swirled and city officials scrambled, Cole was alone, in a quiet office, blinds drawn, jacket folded on the back of a chair. He stared at an old black and white photo on his desk. A woman, late 40s, short afro, work uniform, tired eyes. His mother. The caption scribbled in pen said, "Don't make noise, make change." You ever hear something like that from your parents? A sentence that didn't just stick, it anchored. Because for Cole, it wasn't just memory. It was mission. He wasn't always this calm. He wasn't always this composed. There were days, years ago, when he'd yell back, when he'd fight every disrespect with a louder one. But you don't build power by shouting. You build it by watching, waiting, and when the moment's right, reminding everyone who really holds the keys. But Cole wasn't done. That street moment, that was just the public spark. The real move, it happened a week later at a roundtable meeting inside the Department of Justice, where Cole brought a file that didn't just mention to officers. It named 23, across 7 states, all flagged and passed internal memos, all ignored. And the initiative he proposed that day, it didn't just address what happened on Broad Street. It shook the foundation of traffic policing in America. You want to know what was in that file? You're about to find out. But fair warning, once you see those names, you'll never look at routine traffic stops the same way again. The manila folder Cole laid on the table wasn't thick, just 15 pages. But every single line on those pages carried weight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Because when he opened that file and slid it forward, the silence in the Justice Department's briefing room said everything. 7 states, he began, tone steady. 23 officers, all involved in traffic stops that escalated beyond protocol. All flagged, all dismissed internally, none held accountable. He looked up, scanning the faces around the table. Suit jackets, pens, people who thought they'd seen everything. But not like this. He flipped to the next page. Page 3. Officer Brent Maddox, Arkansas, pulled over a black mother of 2. Her kids were in the back seat. Dashcam shows she was compliant. He dragged her out anyway. Flip. Page 7. Lieutenant Reese, Florida, caught on audio saying, "They scare easier if you flash the cuffs early." Case dismissed after he claimed stress. No follow-up. Flip. Page 11. Officer L. Pierce, Philadelphia, the same man who stopped me last week. This wasn't his first overreach. It was his 9th. The final page wasn't a report. It was a list. A single column of names, badge numbers, and case reference codes. Most marked closed nitrogen monoxide action. He tapped it once. This isn't about me. It's about patterns, predictable ones. And then, the line that made the deputy director lean forward. You've been tracking terrorists for 15 years. But these guys, you let them hide behind paperwork. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't outrage. It was guilt, and maybe a flicker of resolve. You ever been in a room where the people with power finally stop pretending? That's what this was. Cole wasn't just seeking accountability. He was proposing something new. A federal review panel composed of former agents and legal analysts, unaffiliated with state police unions. An AI-powered system to flag repeated behavior across precincts nationwide. A rule that any officer flagged 3 times in traffic stop misconduct would trigger mandatory review with the power to override internal shielding. The deputy director cleared his throat. Do you think something like this would have prevented your stop? Cole didn't blink. No. But it would have made sure it never happened again. The room went quiet again. Then someone whispered, almost too softly to hear. Maybe it's Tom. And maybe it was. Because by the end of that week, a special subcommittee was authorized. Cole was named advisor, and Officer L. Pierce. He wasn't just suspended anymore. He was indicted for falsifying reports, for unlawful search, and for targeting black motorists disproportionately across his precinct. You know what the wildest part is? That file, the one Cole carried, he'd been building it for 3 years, quietly, on evenings, after hours, while everyone else moved on from the incidents. Cole didn't, because he knew the difference between reaction and change. Reaction is loud, public, viral. Change is quiet. It builds, like pressure under stone, until one day it cracks open the whole system. Have you ever carried something for years not for revenge, but for justice? That's what this was. But what Cole didn't know not yet was that someone in that meeting wasn't who they claimed to be, and that the real danger wasn't just outside the system. It was hiding inside. It started with a glance, barely a second, but Cole noticed it as the room cleared after the Justice Department meeting and folders were stacked, and assistants began collecting notes. One man lingered. He hadn't said a word during the whole session. Sat in the back, third chair from the end, navy tie, no pen. No one addressed him. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask a single question. But when Cole stood to leave, the man looked at him. Not hostile, but not impressed either. More like measuring. And something about that look stuck with Cole. You ever feel that chill? That flicker behind the eyes of someone who doesn't care what you survived, only whether you'll ruin what they've built. Cole didn't say anything, but later that night, back in his apartment high-rise, minimal decor, silent but for the faint hum of city below, he ran a quick check, pulled up the seating chart from that morning. 22 attendees, all named, all except one. Third seat from the end, no entry. He frowned. Maybe a clerical error. Maybe not. Cole was careful. Always had been. Even before he wore a badge. Before he built his company. Even before Quantico, he had a sixth sense. A low pulse in the gut when things didn't line up. So he cross-referenced the room's entry logs. Nothing. He requested the security footage from the building's internal system. Corrupted. Convenient. You see where this is going. Because this wasn't just someone who slipped past a sign-in sheet. This was someone with clearance deep enough to erase presence. The problem with chasing shadows isn't that they hide. It's that sometimes they watch you back. The next day, Cole's office received a plain envelope. No return address. Inside, one printed sentence on heavy paper. We don't like leaks. That's it. No name, no demand, just a warning. And that was the moment Cole knew. He hadn't just ruffled feathers. He disturbed something older. Something that survives because people like him usually don't get this far. He sat back in his chair, looked out over the city skyline, tapped his fingers once, twice. Same rhythm he used when standing by his car on Broad Street. Same rhythm his mother used to drum on the steering wheel during long shifts. Not fear, focus. And that's when he made the call. Jessica, he said into the phone. I need a name run. C3. Back row. DOJ session yesterday. Unlisted attendee. Facial scan only. Jessica. His old ops contact. Now freelance. Quiet. Efficient. No questions, she asked. Not yet, Cole replied. Because here's the truth. He wasn't just building justice anymore. Now he was hunting. And the man who looked at him like a problem, he just made himself the subject of the next file. But Cole had no idea that the trail would lead back to someone he once trusted. Someone who knew exactly how he operated. Because while Cole was looking outward, trying to clean up a broken system, one piece of that system had already broken into him. And what they were about to trigger would make the Broad Street stop look like a warm-up. The file came back in under 36 hours. Jessica never missed. Encrypted zip. Single-use password. Time-stamped delivery. Inside, 3 images. All captured from security cams Cole couldn't access, but Jessica could. Each frame, the same man. Same navy tie. Same calm, unreadable face. But it wasn't the face that made Cole's pulse stop. It was the name. Liam Rourke. It took Cole a second to process it. Not because the name was unfamiliar, but because it wasn't. They trained together 15 years ago. Same Quantico intake, same class, same late nights running profiles in coffee-stained rooms. But Liam didn't graduate with Cole. He dropped out halfway through training, said the politics were too fake, said he'd rather work somewhere off-grid. No one heard much about him after that. But now he was sitting 3 seats away from federal power silently observing a meeting meant to reform the system and leaving unlogged. You ever have that moment when your memories get hijacked? When someone you once shared war stories with is suddenly on the wrong side of your story? Cole stared at the screen. 3 images, 3 angles. One goes from the past, now walking through the present like he owned it. He picked up his phone, called Jessica again. This man used to be Liam Rourke, he said. Pause. But that's not the name he's using now. Jessica exhaled. Cole, you're not going to like this. What? There's no Liam Rourke in any agency registry. Not under that face. Not under any face. You sure it's not sealed? No. It's scrubbed. Like witness protection. Like off the books contract ops. Cole sat back. Everything in his body tightened. Not fear. Rage. The quiet kind. Because if Liam or whoever he was now had clearance to sit in on DOJ meetings unlisted, that meant one thing. Someone wanted him there. And someone didn't want Cole's reform reaching the finish line. Because when systems rot, they don't fight you openly. They smile. They delay. They watch. And when you get close to fixing the rot, they come for you. Later that night, Cole stepped into the elevator of his apartment building. He hit PH for penthouse. As the doors began to close, a gloved hand stopped them. A woman stepped in. Late 30s, black coat, no purse, no expression. She didn't press a 4, didn't speak. Cole glanced sideways, watched the reflection of her hand in the mirrored elevator panel. It was shaking barely. He stayed silent. The elevator hummed. Ding, floor 29. Then her phone buzzed. She stepped out without a word. Cole waited until the doors closed, then tapped his wristwatch. It wasn't just a watch. It had a hidden panic protocol, a leftover from his field days. The app launched silently, pinged Jessica's server. Possible surveillance. Cross-check elevator logs. PH access. Because here's the thing. Cole didn't believe in coincidence. And this woman, she wasn't delivering food. Wasn't holding keys. Didn't even make eye contact. You don't go after a man like Cole in the daylight. You unsettle him. Shadow him. Make him start to doubt everything. But they made one mistake. They reminded Cole of what he used to be. And no badge, no ghost, no agency. Wants to wake that version of him back up. But by the time Cole realized who else was watching, it was already too late. Because Liam wasn't alone. And the next person on Cole's tail knew more about his past than even the Bureau did. It came at 2:14 a.m. A single ping. No caller ID. No preview text. Just a black screen and one word. Bucharest. Cole froze. That word hadn't crossed his mind in over a decade. Not since that mission. Not since everything changed. You ever have a part of your life so deeply buried, you start to believe it never happened? That's what Bucharest was for him. A mission scrubbed from records. No official paper trail. No acknowledgments. Just memory and scars. Back then, Cole was still under contract attached to a counter-intel joint task force. He wasn't a field star. He was a shadow, a problem solver. And Bucharest was the only op where he'd ever disobeyed orders, where he chose life over protocol, where he crossed a line to save someone who wasn't supposed to matter. That someone, her name was Elise, asset, technician. And more than that, she decoded systems no one else could. She smiled without trusting. She knew things even Cole couldn't guess. And when their unit was ordered to pull out, leave her behind, he didn't. He faked extraction logs, created a ghost evac route, risked everything. Then she vanished, disappeared from comms, from records, from the world. Cole never told a soul, but someone remembered. And now, someone wanted him to know. They hadn't forgotten either. Jessica called less than an hour later. Her voice was sharp. Cole, I think someone just accessed a tier for archive linked to your Romania file. That file doesn't exist, he said quietly. I know. That's why this is bad. Pause. There's only one person who could have pulled that without triggering alarms. Cole already knew the name. He said it anyway. Elise. Jessica sighed. You think she's alive? I never saw a body. And Liam? I think he's the leash. Jessica went silent for a moment, then said what neither of them wanted to admit. As she's reaching out now, she's either running again, or she wants something. Cole leaned back, eyes locked on the city's night skyline. One word kept echoing in his mind. Why now? Why, after years of silence, did Bucharest resurface the very moment he tried to fix domestic systems? Unless what he was building, the reform, the database, the oversight, was about to expose something Elise needed buried. You ever try to untangle a knot, only to realize the string was never meant to come loose? That's what this was becoming. Cole had always thought his past sins were clean, that breaking protocol for a life meant redemption. But redemption only works when the other person forgives you. What if Elise hadn't? What if she blamed him? And worse, what if someone somewhere inside the DOJ room was working for her? Because shadows don't live alone. They move in networks. And Cole was now a target from both sides. The ones he tried to fix, and the one he thought he saved. But the message from Bucharest wasn't just a memory. It was a signal. Because hours later, someone broke into Cole's encrypted archives. Not to steal, but to leave something. A USB drive with one file. No label, no metadata, just one title. Rewind everything. And when Cole opened it, the voice on the audio wasn't Liam's. It wasn't Jessica's. It was hers. Elise, still alive, still watching. And with a tone that chilled him to the bone, she whispered, You chose justice, Cole. Now choose loyalty. You ever feel like you're in control until someone reminds you you're still in their debt? That's where Cole stood. But the worst part? The file ended with coordinates, and the timestamp wasn't past. It was tomorrow. The coordinates pointed to a warehouse outside DC, off the highway. Not abandoned, just forgotten. The kind of place people drive past for years without ever wondering what's inside. Cole didn't go in blind. He never did. He left his phone in a signal-proof pouch. Took only analog gear. No tracker, no digital ID. If this was a trap, he wasn't going to feed it. But a small part of him, the part still haunted by the whisper, that Fates wanted it to be real. Wanted her to be there. Wanted answers. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just truth. The air inside was cold. Concrete, dust. Faint smell of engine oil and old tech. A single bulb hung from a wire in the center. And beneath it a metal table. On it, a device. Not a bomb. Not a transmitter. A cassette recorder. Analog. Deliberate. And a note. Play. Then leave. No questions. Not yet. He pressed the button. Click. Then her voice. Cole, If you're listening to this, it means you're still the man I once trusted. Or at least you're trying to be. A pause, not for drama, for breath. There are people watching you, not because of what you're doing, but because of what I did. Cole's jaw clenched. LA's continued. I did something, years ago, from an op you never even knew I was part of. Something buried beneath Bucharest. Not data, not intel. Something living. Silence. Then, a witness, someone the Bureau wanted gone. Someone whose testimony would have shattered more than just diplomatic ties. It would have exposed the program itself. Cole felt his heart slow. She kept talking. They called it asset redirection. Fancy name for rerouting dissidents into psychological black sites. They wipe minds. Cole reprogrammed them. Labeled it national security. I got him out, and they've been hunting both of us ever since. The voice softened. But now you've stepped into the light. You've made noise. And whether you know it or not, you just drew the crosshairs off me. Another pause. Thank you for that. But I need you to do one more thing. Cole stared at the recorder like it might bite. Then she said it. Liam wasn't sent to stop you. He was sent to watch your choices. To see if you trade legacy for truth, justice for survival, public exposure for private war. You passed. A long exhale. And then her voice cracked just once. I don't know if I forgive you. Not yet. But I need your help. A beep. Then the tape cut. Cole didn't move. Didn't blink. Because everything in that message rewrote what he thought was the battle. He wasn't just cleaning up local corruption anymore. He'd stepped into the tail end of a cover-up that crossed agencies, borders, and years. And now, he had to decide. Continue his reforms and risk burying LA's again under classified silence? Or go back underground and finish what they both started? You ever feel like your story was finally yours only to realize someone else still owns the ending? That's where Cole stood. But what he didn't know was that while he listened to Elsie's voice, someone else was watching from a rooftop across the lot. A lens, a mic, a signal, transmitting his every move to someone who once swore they'd protect him, and now wanted him erased. Cole left the warehouse without looking back. Didn't touch the recorder again. Didn't search for cameras. He knew they were there. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Because now he had a reason to stop holding back. He walked straight to a safe house in Northwest DC. Not government. Not corporate. Personal. The kind only people who don't trust systems keep. He hadn't been there in 7 years. The lock still recognized his handprint. Inside, dust-covered walls, power generator offline, but one drawer still sealed with a biometric strip. He opened it. Inside a drive. Steel casing, red strip, no logo. Cole stared at it for a moment. This was his real insurance. The one he made after Bucharest, after Elias vanished. Because part of him always knew no one disappears forever. And the truth? It doesn't stay buried unless you want it to. He plugged the drive into an isolated laptop. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, nothing that could trace him. The folder opened. 12 files. Each one tagged with initials, locations and case codes never made public. Project Wraith, Asset X59, Echo Rotation. Code names that once lived inside sealed black budgets now lined up in front of him. Like ghosts ready to speak. One file stood out. Not because of the name, because of the photo. It was Elise, taken 3 years after she was presumed dead. Leaning into a car, dark shades, hair longer. Captured by a drone in Algiers. Date stamped, time stamped. It had been sent anonymously to Cole 6 years ago, back when he still hoped for closure. He never showed it to anyone, not even Jessica, because if Elise had survived that long, she had help. And if someone wanted him to see it, it meant she was never truly lost. Cole cross-checked the metadata again. Same frequency signature as the one in the USB he found earlier. Whoever sent the tape was the same person who sent this, which meant Elise had been preparing for this moment long before Cole launched his reform, long before he stood on Broad Street, long before he got pulled over. You ever feel like every step you thought was your decision had already been placed for you? That was the weight Cole felt now, but instead of crushing him, it focused him. He opened the final folder. Inside, A list. 14 names. High clearance officials across defense, intelligence, and private security. Next to each name, a dollar figure, each over 1.5 million, labeled contract, retainer, renewal, all marked under a shell firm called Argonne Logistics. Cole had seen that name before, not in politics, in construction. It was on a building permit he passed by every week, the one across from City Hall, an unassuming tower with no windows on the first 3 floors. And suddenly, it clicked. Argonne wasn't a front for money. It was a vault, a meeting point, a central hub for the people keeping the machine alive, the same machine that disappeared at Lice. And the person listed as project liaison? Jessica. His Jessica. The one he called. The one who ran facial checks for him. Fed him intel. Warned him about surveillance. He sat back, cold, silent. Was it betrayal? Was it protection? Or had she been trying to steer him all along? You ever trust someone so deeply that when doubt finally arrives, it feels like you're the one who did something wrong? Cole didn't rage, didn't panic. He did what he was trained to do. He made a plan. Because if Jessica was involved, whether as ally or enemy, she was the next move. But what Cole didn't realize was that Jessica had been waiting for this. And she had a message of her own. You're not the only one with backup plans. He didn't call ahead. He didn't send a signal. He just showed up. Jessica's apartment was on the 12th floor, secure entry, silent elevator. Motion sensors disabled with an old code Cole remembered from field ops. She wasn't surprised. Didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't flinch. She just poured him a drink and said, "You saw the files." He didn't answer. Just looked at her, the gaze he once saved for targets who lied well. Jessica sat down slowly. No games. No facade. "Before you ask," she said, "yes, I worked with Argonne." "For how long?" "Since before Bucharest." Cole's jaw tightened. "You fed me intel. You helped me trace Liam. You warned me about surveillance." Jessica nodded. "I did." "Why?" "Because I never stopped protecting you." That stopped him cold. You ever hear a confession that sounds like betrayal but feels like love? That's what this was. Jessica leaned forward. "I didn't lie about who Liam was. But I didn't tell you everything, either. He's not just an observer," she said. "He's the failsafe." Cole blinked. "Failsafe for what?" "For you." Those 2 words shifted the floor beneath him. She continued. "You think this started with LA's, that this is about some buried asset, some reprogrammed witness. But it's not." She stood, walked to a locked case on the bookshelf, fingerprint access. Opened it. Inside, a black dossier, red seal, labeled Subject C214. She handed it to him. Cole opened the first page. It was a surveillance photo, grainy, distant, low light, but the subject was unmistakable. Himself, in Bucharest, before the mission, before OICE. He flipped to the next page. Psych-evals, personality overlays, neural patterning scores. He recognized the test formats. They were early versions of pre-clearance assessments for high-risk operatives, designed not just to measure threat level, but pliability. Jessica sat back down. "You were flagged before they even recruited you, Cole. You weren't just chosen. You were placed." His throat went dry. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," she whispered. "They wanted someone brilliant, controlled, capable of disobedience, but only when it served their design. Bucharest wasn't an accident. LA's wasn't an accident. You were part of it, the variable, the test." And then the sentence that landed like a bullet. "You were the experiment, Cole." The air left the room. Jessica kept talking, her voice steadier now, like she practiced this. "They needed to know if someone like you, with all your potential, all your instinct, could be manipulated without breaking, could be pointed like a weapon without ever realizing who held the grip. But I broke free," Cole said, barely recognizing his own voice. Jessica nodded. "You did. That's why they lost control. That's why Liam was activated. And that's why I stayed close. To make sure they never got you back." Silence. Thick. Electric. Cole stood. He didn't thank her. Didn't accuse her. He just said, "Then help me end it." Jessica looked up, eyes glassy, but fierce. I've been waiting for you to say that for 10 years. But neither of them noticed the small red light blinking inside the spine of the black dossier. A signal, a ping, and 30 seconds later, Liam Rourke knew exactly where they were, and he wasn't coming to talk. The blast on the 13th floor wasn't loud. It was surgical, targeted to jam signals, blow power, freeze cameras, but not kill. That wasn't Liam's style. He wanted control, wanted them alive. The lights in Jessica's apartment flickered once. Then everything went dark. Jessica moved first, rolled behind the kitchen island. Cole stayed still, listening. 3 seconds. 4. Then the door clicked. Not a knock, not forced, just opened. Liam stepped in like he'd lived there. Silencer already on. Body relaxed, eyes calculating. Cole stepped into view. Slow. No weapon drawn. Just words. You were supposed to be the observer. Liam smiled. I was. You were supposed to watch. I did. Cole's voice dropped. You were never going to let this end, were you? Liam shrugged. It was never up to me. I just nudged the outcome. Then he raised the gun not at Cole, but at Jessica. And that's when Cole moved. Fast and direct. Grabbed the cast iron pan from the stove. Swung wide. Liam ducked, but not fast enough. The gun clattered. Jessica kicked it under the counter. Then everything turned chaos. Fists, blood, glass shattering. Two men trained the same way, thinking to steps ahead. But only one of them still had something to lose. Cole got Liam in a chokehold. Tight, clean. But Liam didn't fight it. He leaned in and whispered, You think she's still the mission? Cole froze. What? You think Elias wants your help? She sent the message. She sent the test. Then Liam's last words before blacking out. And you failed. Cole dropped him. Staggered back. Jessica hit the breaker, power flickering back. They stood there, breathing hard. The dossier still lay open. And that's when the apartment door opened again. Not an explosion. Not a breach. Just a soft creak. And there she was. Elias. Alive. Older. Eyes darker. But it was her. Cole didn't move. Didn't breathe. Jessica raised a hand slowly, not in fear, in disbelief. Elias stepped in. No smile. Just 3 words. You weren't supposed to follow. Cole's voice cracked. You're the one who called me. Elias shook her head. I warned you. I gave you a chance to walk away. Jessica stepped forward. You needed him. I needed him quiet. The words hit like a slap. Cole stared at her. You lied. I survived. You used me. I saved you. Silence. Then Elias lowered the bag she was carrying. Unzipped it. Pulled out a drive. Heavy. Coated. This, she said, is the last thread. The one they'll kill for. She looked at Cole, softer now. And you're the only one who knows how to burn it without being traced. Cole stared at the drive, then back at her. All those years, all that memory, and now a choice. Let the system collapse, or hand it over to the very woman who once vanished to save herself. You ever stand in front of everything you thought you wanted only to realize it never wanted you back? Cole took the drive, held it, then turned to Jessica. Final option? Jessica nodded. EMP-1 burst. No trace. No backup. Elias didn't stop him. Didn't flinch. She just watched as Cole placed the drive into the chamber, flipped the switch, and ended the program that built him. Forever. The lights flickered. Then silence. Real silence. No more watchers. No more files. Just peace. Or something like it. And that's how it ended. Not with gunfire. Not with revenge. But with a man reclaiming his name not as an agent, not as a CEO, but as a man, free,